I'm the managing consultant for the EPIC team here at Galen. Also with me today is Justin Campbell, who is the Director of Technical Services. For those of you on the call who are not familiar with us, I would like to take a moment to share our backgrounds and today's agenda with you. Today's webcast will focus on Allscripts to EPIC conversions, but we understand that there are some people on the call who are not converting from Allscripts to EPIC. Please know that the conversion process is similar between different vendors, and we believe that you will still benefit from this webcast. I would also like to take a minute to make you aware of another webcast that is happening this Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern called Clinical Data Conversions, Functional and Technical Considerations. We have 2 Galen employees who will be leading this call from a legacy system to Allscripts Enterprise conversion perspective. Again, you may still benefit from attending the webcast even if you are not converting to Allscripts. Today's call, we really want to leave enough time to answer and get through any questions that you may have regarding your conversion. This presentation is based off the 8 or so questions that we received prior to the webcast. We will start by going over the high-level benefits of a conversion, the basic conversion process, the different types of conversions, and what tools Galen has to help with this process. You will then be able to ask any questions that you may have. There is a possibility that we may not be able to answer all of your questions. We will take those questions back and we'll get answers to you in a timely fashion. So to tell you a little bit about myself, again, my name is Julia Snap and I'm the managing consultant for the EPIC team. I've been implementing and supporting EHRs for around 8 years. I started by implementing Allscripts Enterprise and have worked with both versions 10 and 11. I then transitioned to implement EPIC. I am both inpatient orders and ambulatory certified. My inpatient orders experience is working a lot with laboratory, radiology, diet, and ancillary EAPs and LRRs. For those of you who are not familiar with EPIC, EAP is what EPIC refers to as a non-medication order, and LRR is a resultable component. I also have a lot of experience working on the ambulatory team, and most recently have been working on disease management smart forms. In regards to my conversion experience, I have experience working with customers who have transitioned from one EHR platform to another. I'm currently working on an engagement converting Allscripts and Centricity ambulatory EHRs to an EPIC Enterprise system. On this call, I will be representing the professional side of the data conversions, answering questions about dictionary to master file mappings, testing and validation processes. I'll hand it over to Justin Campbell so he can tell you a little bit more about himself.
Thanks, Julia. This is Justin Campbell speaking. I'm the Director of Technical Services at Galen. I've been at Galen for about 5 years now, and the type of work our group does really runs the gamut, from reporting to analytics to integrations, HIE, and a large part of what we do is data conversions. As there was a lot of consolidation and acquisition in the marketplace, our clients came to us with asking for help to get the data they took great pains to track in their electronic system, get that data moved out of the source system and moved over to their destination system so that they could use that valuable data to provide extraordinary patient care to their patients. The scope of the conversion work that we've done in the past, like I said, it runs through various amount of vendors, source systems, clients, large and small. We find groups that are taking or acquiring sort of smaller groups and bringing them into their integrated delivery network and wish to take the data in that source system and bring it into the target system. We recognize there is a lot of movement in this industry, and as such made a big investment from a technical perspective into building an industry-leading platform. That platform addresses some of the common components of conversions and contains pieces that I'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation, including intelligent mapping, automated validation, and data archiving. For the scope of this presentation, we'll really discuss the technical components of Allscripts to EPIC conversions, and those largely entail groups of larger size and typically have very complex data structures and data storage. And with that, what we'd like to do is open up with a poll to allow you to introduce a little bit about yourselves. The first question we'll ask is, what current role do you have at your organization? I'll leave a few minutes for folks to answer. Great. Okay. We'll wait for that poll to close, and I'll share the results with you. So it looks like we have some consultants, we have some functional application folks, we have some technical folks, project managers, really some good representation on the call. The next question we'd like to present is, where are you at in the conversion process? Perhaps you're not part of a conversion, but you're here to gain a little bit more knowledge about conversion. So with that, I'll open up the poll. So it looks like the majority of folks are here to learn, which is great. You know, we're here to help you in that endeavor and also answer any questions that you may have. We do have a few folks who are in evaluation and scoping, and that's a critical time in the conversion process. So we will certainly see if we can help those folks. With that, I'll turn it over to Julia.
So for many of you, your organization probably decided to abstract the paper charts in preparation for your first EHR Go Live. For groups that have abstracted prior to Go Live, we've heard how beneficial it is to be able to start with some usable and meaningful data in the system. Many groups that have worked with us sometimes are converting more than 8 to 10 years worth of data, and we understand that providers have spent a lot of time building up these charts and don't want to feel as though they're losing everything when they're switching between EHRs. They want as much of the chart to be converted to the new EHR. Later in this presentation, Justin will talk a little bit more about the different types of conversions. Discrete conversions allow for continuity between historical data and post-conversion production data. Any allergy, problem, medication, lab result that gets converted from Allscripts in a discrete manner can be actionable in Epic. For example, if a patient has a penicillin allergy in Allscripts, if that gets converted over to Epic, DUR checking will check the patient's allergy against the medication to see if there may be a possible reaction. Lab results that get converted in a discrete manner can be set up to trend with future lab data. This trending will appear seamless to the end user in results review, synopsis report, smart links, and any other place that pulls in LRR information. If your organization has decided to convert some of this data in non-discrete methods, Epic sidebar functionality makes it easy for you to display a text-based report and still allows you to easily navigate the chart to manually transcribe and enter in some of the data. There are different factors that will dictate if a discrete or non-discrete conversion is a better option for the data type and for your organization. Determining what you're going to convert and how the data will be converted is sometimes not an easy decision. For some groups, it will all depend on if the data can be extracted out of Allscripts in a format that can be loaded into Epic. Galen can help your organization better understand what the value is for converting the data. Sometimes the money spent on extracting, cleaning up, and loading the data isn't worth the benefit that end users will get out of having the data. Your strategy shouldn't be just because the data is there that you should convert it. It really is recommended for you to understand the benefit that your organization will get by having the data converted, but also to understand what the cost will be. It isn't necessarily the amount of what you are converting that makes a conversion challenging, but it's the complexity of the data and what you are converting. One of the biggest challenges that organizations face with data conversions or chart abstraction is the common phrase, garbage in equals garbage out. Many times when an error is found in the target system, when you look at the source system, the error is also there. A common example of this is that a provider says that the medication is displaying incorrectly in Epic. When we look in Allscripts, it is also incorrect. If the medication dosage or strength isn't in the source system, that information doesn't magically appear in the target system. Another example is if an antibiotic wasn't written with an effective end date, or if a problem wasn't properly resolved, then this old or out-of-date information gets converted into the new system. With all conversions, it is very important to give your end users the time to clean up their charts and to ensure that they understand any junk that is left in the legacy chart. If those data elements are part of the conversion, will get converted into the new system. Encourage your end users to reconcile their current charts, clean up the medications that are no longer active, the acute problems that have been resolved. They'll appreciate it when they log into Epic and they're viewing a clean chart. The next slide is actually one of our current clients' conversion strategy when moving from Allscripts to Epic. This group has a 7 to 8 month conversion timeline. They're converting both discrete and non-discrete data. It is important to define what is in scope for a conversion, but sometimes it is also important to highlight what is not included in a conversion. This may sound kind of funny, but when you're working so closely with the data, it's not always clear if something is part of the conversion or not. A recent example that I experienced was with orders and results. The project team communicated that lab orders and results were part of the conversion. When the conversion went live and users started using Epic, there was a lot of end-user frustration and urgent meetings trying to figure out workflows that hadn't been considered because people assumed that when they said orders and results conversions, that meant future and standing lab and radiology orders were also being converted. But really, the project team thought it was clear enough that when they said final resulted, that orders and result conversion actually meant final resulted lab and radiology results. If this project team had a list of items that were not included in the conversion, this might have been avoided. Another reason why it's important to clearly understand what is in scope and what is not in scope is in regards to your timeline. You'll want to stay as close to your scope as possible to not risk impacting the conversion timeline and possibly pushing out your go-live date. So the conversion process, the first step in the conversion process is to extract the legacy data. Justin, do you mind going to the next slide? Sorry. Or the next one. There we go. The first step in the conversion process is to extract the legacy data. The technical resources will take the data that they extracted out of Allscripts and compile a mapping workbook. The process is to then compare this information with the extracts out of Epic. The Epic data usually leverages a lot of Epic's model system and any changes that have been made to the master files. It is important to have open lines of communication between the groups working on the conversion and the implementation teams. This is to ensure that any changes that are made around elements that are part of the conversion get properly communicated so the mapping is as accurate as possible. One of the questions that we received prior to the webcast was around the process of mapping laboratory orders and result data. This is one of the master files that is the most challenging for many organizations, as generally groups are interfacing with multiple lab vendors. There are different classifications of lab orders, chemistry, hematology, blood bank, micropathology, and the massive number of result components. Some of the groups that we have worked with have decided that it is best for their organization to not map this conversion data to Epic's model records that will be used to store new production data, but to create new records. It is important to have clinical resources who understand this data and what is clinically appropriate, and analysts who understand the structure of the master files and what implications there are if you map multiple vendor information, whether it's conversion data or production data, to the same EAPs or LRRs. Epic has great functionality that will allow organizations to map multiple vendor information to minimize the need to build out individual records. However, sometimes it is clinically necessary to break these components out. Without going into too much detail on this call, I would like to point out one of the nicest features of LRR, which is the resultable master file. LRR has functionality called the common name and base name. What this allows organizations to do is to have separate LRRs, and if the LRRs share the same base and common name, you can group these components so they trend and display as one resolvable component in Epic. However, in the data structure, they are separate, so if you ever needed to separate the data out for any reason, you are easily able to do so. Different organizations have different policies, but for some groups, it is important to store patient reported or manually transcribed lab results to one LRR and to have interface lab results storing to another LRR. However, providers want to be able to trend and view the data as if it was only one component. The LRR structure allows the project team to configure the master files so the data integrity remains, yet the end users are able to view the data as they prefer. During the mapping process, the resources doing the mapping will have to rely on others who are very familiar with the data. It is very common to ask laboratory and radiology resources questions on orders and results, and to ask the HIM team questions about doc types, and maybe even pull in a pharmacist to ask questions about medications. After the analysts have mapped the data in the spreadsheets, you will get this information validated by the end users. Once the sign-off is complete, the tech team will take this data and format it into HL7 messages. These HL7 messages are then loaded into a test system. After the data is loaded, this is when your testing and validation process starts. Testing and validation of the data is very time and resource consuming. You really want your end users to be able to compare Allscripts on one screen and Epic on the other. We highly recommend your analysts and SMEs perform the unit testing to alert of any significant errors that they notice between the systems. We encourage you to build a diverse team to help validate and test the different data elements. For groups that are converting medications, we've heard that it's very beneficial to have a pharmacist available who can assist with any medication conversion questions and to also participate and provide final sign-off for the converted medications. Then bring your providers in who are more familiar with the clinical data. When you're looking at text-based results, pathology results as an example, the formatting of the data is very important. In the Epic system, pathology results are viewable in multiple areas. Chart review, results review, in basket reports are some examples. You'll want to ensure that the text is formatted correctly in these different areas. We also recommend that you think about the different variations of data. As daunting as it may sound, you'll want to test each variation of the data. One way you can do this is to ask your providers to give you a handful of patients with complex charts. This may be a geriatric patient with years of data, or even a pediatric patient with specialized tests, growth charts, etc. Hopefully these patients will have diverse, complex data that will cover the many different variations of data that you will be converting. Epic has great tools that allow you to pull data into your notes through smart links, and you're able to pull discrete data in review flow sheets, results review, synopsis reports, etc. It will also be important that you test these tools to make sure that the converted data is formatted correctly to maximize the use of this functionality. Sometimes how reference range or common information is converted as free text or appended to the result value, it can clutter up these tools, which sometimes results in losing the discrete data functionality within Epic. It is important to make sure you get final sign-off from your clinicians who are able to validate the converted data. Now it's time to load the data into production. It is recommended that you load a couple of charts and then have your clinicians be present to verify and validate the data is coming in correctly. Once you're comfortable with what you're seeing, allow the conversion to move forward. You'll probably encounter errors. The error resolution will depend on what the error is and when the error was detected. Your project team can work with Epic and your providers to determine the safest way to resolve the error. Justin, next slide, please.
Great, and I can take over from here, Julia. So what we want to introduce next were the different types of options that we have for conversions. We know every group is different, and there are certainly costs involved and timelines to be considerate of, and we try to take that into account when building our approach for development of our conversion platform. One of the types of conversions or options that folks most likely want or desire is the discrete option. And in that way, the meaningful data that you've stored discretely can be reported on, can be flowed in the target system, workflows remain intact. But that discrete option there's more effort involved. Consider for a moment the source database, which might be inclusive of thousands of tables, several gigabytes of data, and not to mention the scanned image footprint that may exist from historical documents that have been scanned in, insurance cards, faxes that have come through the chart. So with the first discrete option that we offer, that's where we're extracting the discrete data out of the source system, whether that's a MySQL database, a SQL database, or an Oracle database, as available. Some data is not readily available in the system or is a bit tougher to get at in that source system. But it typically includes the allergies, immunizations, medications, problems, results, scanned images, documents, and vital signs. Those are the most common components. We also receive requests for tasks or annotations or notes, and we can certainly evaluate those on a case-by-case basis. There is also the scanned image footprint that we're able to bring over as well. So the source format that we typically see runs the gamut. It could be a JPEG, it could be a TIFF, it could be a PDF. In EPIC, we standardize and want to import in PDFs. As such, we'll leverage common off-the-shelf tools to convert to JPEG, from JPEG to TIFF, and maintain that same integrity in the original image or document. Lastly, the discrete component consists of XML-based CCD patient chart summaries and corresponding metadata. Those are extracted from the Allscripts system. As we know, Allscripts, as being meaningful use compliant, is able to produce a CCD for a patient. We then take that CCD and via patient transporter are able to import it into EPIC, and the data is then transferred to the patient chart in a discrete fashion. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the non-discrete option. So certain cases may warrant us going down this path. For instance, we may decide that given our timelines for go live, it just may not be feasible to convert that discrete data, and as such, what we want to convert is just a PDF comprehensive chart summary for the patient, or perhaps only certain scans or a subset of the data that's exported to a PDF. If available, we'll extract a CCD from the source system, one per patient, and we'll convert that to PDF. Extraction of notes, conversion from their native format to PDF, will then be pursued for import into EPIC via their Bridges application. The Bridges application is able to accept metadata in an HL7 transaction and a pointer to the document that we wish to import, in this case the PDF. The same follows for scans, conversion from their native format to PDF, and again, import into EPIC via Bridges. And in the target system, in the EPIC system, that'll appear as a static PDF document. It will not be actionable at that point in time. Next, let's talk about what tools Galen has to offer. I'll let Julia address the professional side.
Thanks. Galen offers many tools that can assist your organization when you're converting between Allscripts to EPIC. On the professional side, we have a document that highlights the changes in functionality that you may encounter when migrating between Allscripts and EPIC. We've highlighted workflow changes, functionality changes, and differences within the build and configuration. We also have a terminology crosswalk that defines key terms and then matches the Allscripts term up with the EPIC term. We hope that these documents will speed up the transition period for your project teams that have experience working in both systems. The terminology crosswalk is a great tool for you to easily see the key terms that are used by both applications, but their definitions may be a little different, or the terms that are named differently but mean the same, or terms that are named differently but mean the same thing. An example of this on the Allscripts side, you refer to location. In EPIC, location doesn't necessarily mean your site or your department. It means more of your revenue location. In Allscripts, you use the term clinical summary. In EPIC, the term is called after visit summary. And I will turn it over to Justin so he can give a high-level overview of the tools that we have available on the technical side.
Great, thanks, Julia. So on the technical side, like I said, we made a lot of investment in IP to facilitate safe, automatic transfer of data, and efficient, for that matter, transfer of data from Allscripts to Epic. That consists of an intelligent mapper. That intelligent mapper leverages Soundex functionality. The U.S. Census Bureau utilized this functionality in the order of identifying people with misspelled names, identifying duplicates. And we leverage that same functionality to map between the source nomenclature to the target nomenclature and identify for audit to the end validator that the mappings are indeed valid, or if they may need some manual entry. We also have a conversion validation solution. That validation solution leverages checksum functionality. You can think of that as a digital signature. In the source system, the data is going to have a digital signature. In the target system, that data is going to have a separate digital signature. And we've built up a tool that compares those two signatures to identify any defects that we may have that may have occurred in the conversion into Epic. And lastly, we have a data archiving application. It may be that we don't want to convert all of the data in the source system. Maybe we only want the last year's worth of data, given the effort involved in migrating that over, or perhaps maybe that's the most pertinent and relevant data. Our archiving solution allows you to aggregate from several data sources and act as a data repository if ever a clinician or end user needed to go back and pull up the patient history for a particular patient when that data has not been converted into the target system. I'll pass over to Julia.
So another question that we got prior to the webcast was that an organization is already live with Epic in their inpatient hospitals, and they're just starting their Allscripts ambulatory conversion to Epic. They wanted to know if they should go forward with converting the ambulatory data and what items they should consider in this process. So to start, yes, it is possible to convert data into a system that is already live, but this definitely adds to the complexity of the conversion. So to start with the Epic master file build and data mapping, many of the Epic master files have already been configured and built. You'll probably be able to leverage this data for your conversion, but you may also need to create new master file entries to support the conversion. In addition, some of these master files will also be modified to support your Epic ambulatory implementation that is happening at the same time. So in addition to keeping the lines of communication open between your conversion and Epic ambulatory implementation team, you'll also really need to consider your change management strategy and remember that any changes that you are making are in a production environment. It's also important to remember that when you convert the ambulatory data into Epic, there may already be data for that patient. Some patients won't have any data in their charts, so they can be assumed to be of low risk. Then you'll have some patients that have patient level and encounter level information. That information could be from an urgent care visit or from an inpatient admission. Your organization will need to make the decision on what your conversion strategy is for those patients. You will want to consider if you allow the converted data to merge with the production data. You don't really want to duplicate or have contradicting information. Some organizations have made the decision that if allergy information has already been documented in the patient's chart, that it not get overwritten by any conversion data. Those patients get flagged, and the PCP or another delegated provider gets notified on who those patients are and has to decide what information should get added to the chart. Another item to consider is during the actual conversion. How are you going to notify a provider who is in a chart that the conversion is complete and they should reconcile the chart? It's hard to know how long a conversion will take, and providers shouldn't have to guess if the chart has been fully converted or not. One way other organizations have done this is to add a dummy medication record to the list that states that the conversion is complete. Then the provider knows that they need to work on reconciling the chart to clean up any duplicates or outdated information that was not taken care of in Allscripts. Now that the conversion is live and the project is not over, encourage your end users to reconcile the chart and make sure the data looks correct. You'll probably encounter errors, and As we mentioned earlier, it will depend on what the error is and when the error was detected that will dictate the safest way to resolve the issue. Next slide, please. So, rollout considerations. During the transition from Allscripts to Epic, we recommend that you consider freezing rolling out additional Allscripts sites if you are still implementing. There are a couple of reasons why we recommend this approach. The first reason is around staffing of your Epic implementation team. You probably brought over some of your Allscripts team members to work on the Epic team, so your Allscripts team is probably already lean. Usually these resources are staffed to help support the sites that are already live. It may be too much work for them to continue to implement and roll out Allscripts. The second reason is that the less number of sites that you have, the less data that is part of the conversion. Before you make this decision, you'll want to consider what impacts this will have on your meaningful use attestation and any other government-sponsored initiatives. And lastly, your end users may thank you, especially the ones who are more resistant to change, as it will require one less transition for them, one less system that they have to learn. Understandably, your conversion strategy for the sites live on Allscripts will be a little different from the sites that are still on paper. Next slide, please.
And I will get into the conversion background a little bit. Just on our breadth of experience, we recognize that the scope of this call is limited to Allscripts to Epic conversions, but by virtue of the fact that we've touched so many vendor systems and different types of technology topologies out there, it's given us a lot of experience and allowed us to review the variability in the data we've seen, the variability in the approaches that we then needed to institute. So for instance, we've extracted data out of NextGen, ECW, Centricity, the list goes on, Allscripts, and our target systems often include those same vendors. You know, it could be, again, a Merge or a Greenway system. The source database technologies, Allscripts we recognize as a Microsoft SQL Server database, but our breadth has certainly encompassed other database topologies, including DB2, MySQL, and Oracle, for instance. And again, we can be viewed as a strategic partner for organizations looking to expand maybe their practice. So a large integrated delivery network, again, may acquire a 8 to 10 group or 8 to 10 doc practice and wish to absorb that data into their standardized system. The benefits of conversions are certainly compelling. You know, you don't need to support multiple systems or have folks who are experienced in multiple systems and pay the licensing that goes along with that. So we can use our experience in assisting and partnering with organizations to acquire groups and allow a strategy to manifest itself going forward. And again, everything goes back to our automated platform. You know, that staging environment is critical, so we're able to scrub the data, we're able to do mappings, we're able to identify anomalies. So first things first, from a technical perspective and really from an overall perspective, we need to scope it out. And oftentimes what we're asked is, well, how do you go about scoping conversions? And the same things we hear from our clients, which is, you know, our system is different. That's exactly right. Every system, every implementation is different. And so we need to take that into account when scoping out a conversion. But the high-level components that go into it that we ask our clients in a scoping call are typically, what are the number of providers, what are the number of years of data, and what are the different types of specialties you support. Of course, we'll need to know what version and which vendor source system you're on and what the target system will be. The scale, like I mentioned before, a small practice, primary care practice with 1 year of data may have a relatively small footprint with regard to their database size, whereas a large group may have several terabytes of images or scans in their footprint. Lastly, we ask, what interfaces do you have in place? Oftentimes, people assume that interfaces will make their way over by virtue of a conversion. And these considerations need to be taken into account, certainly. Oftentimes groups will have an enterprise interface engine, so they can simply repoint an interface or enable a feed to the new target system, in this case Epic. The following slide is an example of a source system assessment. We have a number of scripts that we run, canned scripts, that we run against the Allscripts database to tease out important critical variables that will decide the scope of the engagement. In this case, you can see we've done a record analysis for the different item types for appointments, lab results, vitals, radiology results, and transcriptions. Oftentimes what we're trying to get are counts of data. That way we're able to forecast out what the effort is going to be and a timeline, quite frankly, to import that data into the target system. Also, we look at compendium analysis. You know, what are the counts for the different types of encounters or different types of lab results or vitals or radiology results. And that variability allows us to scope out what the effort's going to be in mapping that data from one system to another. Next, we'll discuss the HL7 data elements. The Epic conversions, the discrete portions of Epic conversions, can really be broken out into two areas. The first area is HL7 data elements. These components go in through the existing feeds in Epic that Epic uses for their real-time interfaces. Those include demographics, appointment encounters, results, and transcriptions. As we know, there are many different types of results, including laboratory, radiology, cardiology, microbiology, blood bank, the list goes on and on. With transcription, there could be both structured and unstructured notes. So certainly we need to take into consideration with the structured notes, is there an ability to bring that data over discretely, or do we bring it over as really a static document for import into Epic? The other side of the fence are the CCD data elements. I mentioned patient transporter a little bit earlier. So to complement the HL7 feeds that accept inbound data, Epic also has the ability to consume a CCD, parse that CCD, and store to the following discrete elements. Those are really the core clinical elements that are stored in any patient chart, and they're inclusive of allergies, medications, problems, and immunizations. And there's certainly several types of problems, including past surgical history, past medical history, family history, and social history. There are oftentimes decisions that need to be made in the conversion process. Are there certain types of statuses that we filter? Are there certain types of problems that we filter? Do we only bring over active medications, et cetera? But at the core of this, what we are doing is producing a CCD so it can go through that patient transporter utility and import ultimately into Epic. I'm going to touch on some of the components of the conversion platform I introduced earlier. The data archive environment software. This is a repository or read-only environment housing legacy EHR data. As I mentioned before, you can aggregate that data across several different data sources. Perhaps you have a system that you would need to sunset and you're only using it for read-only purposes, again paying licensing and support on that. What we could do is produce a summary of the data in that source system and bring that into the archive environment. And what that archive environment does is it leverages a web-based interface so users have full search, print, and export capabilities. It provides simple, secure chart access, HIPAA compliant, and it can act as the single point of access for several legacy clinical applications. As you see from the screenshots here, it leverages our patented Vital Center technology. And with that technology, we provide audit of patient access, and we also provide configurable PDF exports of charts and scans. That way, if you needed to print it out or dump it to a flash drive or export it from the system, you have that capability. The next piece I introduced earlier was the Intelligent Mapper. Again, that delivers automated suggestions to increase efficiency and accuracy when mapping source data to the targeted nomenclature or codification in the new system. what's produced out of this platform is a workbook. It's an Excel workbook that will allow you to examine the source system codification scheme, source system name, and any other components and usage counts. You'll then be able to get a suggestions of corresponding equivalent in the target system. So for instance, Beasting may have a code of 1234 in the Allscripts system. That code in Epic may be ABCD. So what we do is match on name and offer suggestions and allow the end user to approve of those suggestions instead of painstakingly going through the mapping themselves. Now we do understand there are standards that are used out there, ICD-9, ICD-10, with regard to problems, NDC with medications, but time and time again we find that this intelligent mapping comes in handy when going through the exercise of getting everything mapped in a comprehensive fashion. Automated validation. This provides a second level of validation to the integrity of the data entering the Epic system without compromising project milestones. And again, that process leverages a checksum functionality to evaluate digital signatures. We then expose that data in a summarized fashion as well as a detailed fashion. So you can see the results of the checksum calculation, and you can see the discrete elements to identify on a detail level data that was loaded in based upon the data that existed in our staging environment. We also get high-level counts. Perhaps we have account of valid items, account of invalid items, maybe duplicates, unverified items, those that failed, etc. And the key here is automation. All of our platform leverages services to provide for automation, so that there's not the ability to have failures due to human manual intervention. And lastly, I'll touch on roles, something we haven't really addressed yet, but the different roles that are involved in conversions. The first is conversion analyst. Their job is to analyze design decisions impacted by data conversion, perform the actual data mapping, make sure that the EHR system is properly configured, and they're also responsible for the data validation and testing. Project manager, they're responsible for keeping the project on track, keeping the deliverables and timelines intact, and managing scope creep. The conversion technician, we're responsible for pulling the data out of the legacy system, analyzing that, exposing it in an intelligent fashion to the stakeholders, and ultimately importing that into the target system. With that, Julie and I would like to open it up to Q&A. I think the best format for Q&A is to issue questions via the Q&A window within this WebEx. So we have some questions that we aggregated before the webcast that we're able to address, but invite any of the folks currently on the phone to pose their questions. Not all at once. Okay. Well, as folks are thinking about questions they may have, and again, this was a lot of material to be presented. We certainly, with these conversions, there are a lot of moving parts in play, and Julie and I tried to do our best to cover all of those components of the conversion project. The first question that I solicited ahead of time was, how do we decide which data is appropriate to bring over? And that's going to be a decision that really is dictated by your organization. Each of those data elements are going to mean something different to the different specialties potentially involved. It's going to mean something different in terms of effort, and it's going to mean something different in terms of its availability in the source system, quite frankly. With regard to Allscripts, we know that data as well as anyone, and know which discrete components are available as well as non-discrete components. But oftentimes, folks may look at, what are the low-hanging fruit in terms of the data. It certainly may not be structured notes, but it may be problems, allergies, and medications, sort of the core components of the clinical chart that we had talked about. The next question that we are posed is, have you had experience converting multiple source systems into EPIC? And that is a great question. And the answer to that question is yes. Most recently, conversion that comes to mind that we recently scoped out, there are several different vendor systems in play. And again, that's the purpose of our platform or our staging environment. It's to act as an aggregator for different source systems in play. And the conversion platform has the smarts built into it to identify which data components came from which source. So you can really segment out the different sources of the conversion, but ultimately gain efficiencies by converting that data all at once. So there are definitely different strategies we can use, but it all goes back to that conversion platform. So great question. We definitely have had experience converting multiple source systems into EPIC. Any other questions out there? I'll address one other question that we got ahead of time. And it's something that it's a question that's been asked of us before in non-Allscripts to EPIC conversions. And are there better sources of data than the source system? And quite frankly, it's a great question to ponder. When you're sending prescription data to Allscripts, they have aggregated all that medication data, and they oftentimes will act as a source for historical medications when you're first bringing up a system. So in that case, sure, if you're able to negotiate access to the data from Allscripts, that's probably the best point of truth. And that capability exists to import that data into EPIC. Or perhaps you have a vendor, your laboratory information system. Maybe that's the best source of data rather than pulling results out of the EHR. Perhaps you have an historical load from the laboratory information system over HL7 feeds to the target system. So the key is we're fully supportive of evaluating all avenues in getting data into that target system and evaluating all sources of that data. Our job is to do it, again, in the most efficient, the safest way possible. And Julia, I'll let you field this next question. The question is, do you recommend big bang rollout for conversion, or inpatient first followed by ambulatory, or reverse?
So EPIC's general recommendation is that ambulatory goes live first and then EPIC follows. I've actually been part of EPIC implementations where we went live with inpatient first, followed by ambulatory, but the only conversion work that we did was actually when we brought up the inpatient hospital first. Not necessarily knowing the size of the organization, it's hard to give like a strong recommendation, but I do generally think EPIC's recommendation of bringing ambulatory first followed by inpatient works well with how the master files are structured, and then how your team is structured to support the build and the foundation of EPIC's system. But if you want to send an email with more information and have, a follow-up discussion later about the pros and cons to the different approaches, I'm more than willing to do that.
Great. And I'll also note that we'll publish the Q&A after the webcast and send it out to all the attendees, so you can view which questions were posed and our responses to those questions. There was one more technical question that I wanted to address. Again, and it's been asked of us time and time again, is it revolves around go live. How is it that Santa drops off all the gifts in the chimney in one night? How does Galen support gap conversions? And the answer is, if the Epic system isn't already in use, then we want to leverage that as much as possible to prep that system and start loading that system. And oftentimes what we'll do is we'll load all the historical data up to a certain date, and then from that date to the actual go-live date, there will be a gap conversion performed where we'll take the delta and load that in. And certainly, we can be flexible in the approaches that we offer, but that's the most common approach. And oftentimes, folks are interested in mainly the past or previous year's worth of data. And the biggest component that can be very costly in terms of time is probably images. If you have a fairly large footprint to import, certainly you need to be considerate of that. And we've certainly had those clients before where that was something that we addressed in the background, was loading up all of those historical scanned images first and then addressing the discrete items, because the discrete items are going to go in a lot quicker. Julia, another question I'll let you address is, how does Epic configure their teams?
So Epic, so if you're familiar with Allscripts, generally on the ambulatory side for Allscripts, you have just an ambulatory team. And that structure is very similar when you implement Epic. On the inpatient side, they break up their teams into more modular based. So you'll have on the inpatient side someone who's certified in order builds, clinical documentation, HIM, the pharmacy applications, or any other ancillary groups. ASAP is the emergency department. But ambulatory generally is just one ambulatory team. You probably will have people within that team that work closely with the inpatient resources that might specialize in order build or medication record build or the clinical documentation. But if you're an ambulatory certified analyst, you are trained on how to build all of the master files to support an ambulatory rollout, whereas on the inpatient side, you really are more focused in a general area, and you know that area very well, and then you have to work with the other teams for the complete inpatient implementation. I'm assuming it was regarding functionality based, but if you have more specific questions on the different types of resources, the clinical subject matter experts, technical analysts, I could probably answer those questions as well.
Great. Are there any other questions out there that folks may have? Okay. Julia, did you have any other questions you wanted to address?
I think I was able to actually answer all of them in the presentation.
Very good. I'll then turn it over to you.
Okay. So just another reminder that there is another webcast this Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern that will focus more on different legacy EHRs converting to Allscripts ambulatory EHR. So feel free to sign up for that webcast. Again, even though you're not converting to you may not be converting to Allscripts, you probably will learn the general concepts are the same for the conversions, and I'm sure you'll learn something from that webcast. And we really just want to thank you all for attending and participating in our webcast today. Our contact information is up on the slide, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. And we will be sending a list of the questions that were asked and our answers.
Yeah, thanks again. We certainly appreciate your attendance today. And to echo Julia's remarks, please don't hesitate to reach out to us should you have any questions. Our contact information is there. Thanks again.